So, had our watermelon last night. I told you a few days ago that we went to the grocery store, picked up a watermelon. I sure do like eating watermelon on hot summer days. It just reminds me of my childhood at my grandparents' house. It's not quite as hot as it was last week. It's in the 90s, which is pretty tolerable. I haven't been sweating profusely like we did last week. The humidity is down. I think that's what it was so bad last week, was the temperature was in the 90s, but the heat index got us up to 105. Well, I don't think the heat index is near as bad. There's somewhat of a breeze. As a matter of fact, last week Carolyn hung the laundry out, and it had that musky smell after it dried because there was just no breeze around here. This week, no problem. She's got the laundry hanging. It's already dry, so things are looking up. I think it's supposed to get hot again on Saturday, but I don't see any indication of a high heat index. It's supposed to get up to like 99 to 100 degrees, but you know, it's a little difficult to bear without an air conditioner, but it can be done. So for those who says, oh, you're going to die without an air conditioner, we're managing quite well. There's a couple days it's like, wow, this is terrible. But the biggest problem I think with last week was it was cold, then we had a mild day, and then it was hot. Well, now we have acclimated a little bit to it. As a matter of fact, I got up this morning, well, actually the last couple of mornings. Temperature in the house is in the low 70s, and I'm a bit chilly, so I put a sweatshirt on. I left the sweatshirt on until about 9 o'clock today, so you get acclimated to the heat, and then you just try to keep hot, I guess. I don't know. Regardless, it can be done. Just drink plenty of water. So I thought I'd do something a little different today. I've answered questions before, kind of a this or that type of video. But I'm going to answer questions that I got from a live feed that I attended from one of my favorite YouTubers. Now, she's not off-grid, so she answers questions differently than what I answer them. Now, I answered the questions down in the comment section, and her and I are friends, and she read my answer and said, okay, this is a good idea for, you know, tiny house, off-grid living, that kind of thing. But one of the first questions that I could answer when I got into the live feed was about freezer space. Having enough freezer space, you don't want to take up valuable freezer space, because the YouTuber said something about put your rice and flour in the freezer to kill the bugs, because you get those little bugs that grow after a few weeks, and then take it out. Well, one of the commenters said, well, you don't want to take a valuable freezer space, you got meats and stuff in there, which I agree, you do. Now, first of all, with our flour and rice and that kind of stuff, we buy that right before or during the winter time, right before the hard freeze. That way I don't have to worry about killing the bugs in the flour, so we can store the flour. I take it outside into the well house. You only have to freeze it for 2 or 3 days. So when you get a hard freeze, it kills all the bugs, you don't have to worry about it, and you don't have to use any electricity, just use nature. So we buy enough to last us for 5 years. I mean, we won't ever use that much rice and flour. We vacuum seal it because we store it outside. The flour, I think you should vacuum seal simply because it's going to go get moisture in it and, you know, just bugs and different things. Whereas the rice, you don't have to vacuum seal that. You can put that in a jar or coffee can. Now, as far as freezer space, living off grid, freezers is really a difficult option for us. As you know, our little dorm size refrigerator has a built-in regular freezer in it, the upper door, the whole thing, and it gets down to whatever temperature you want to get it down to. Works just like a regular refrigerator, and we can get about 30 days worth of meat in there. I mean, we really pack it in there, and that's for 2 people, but it is our largest consumer of electricity. And being on solar panels, electricity is so valuable. If we didn't have the refrigerator, we'd have an endless amount of electric. For the other appliances that we use, a fan, tablet, cell phones, charging batteries for the little lantern that we use for light, we'd have plenty of electric. I would actually think I'd have enough electric to run the well pump without having to worry about, is it a sunny day? Because right now, the only way I can run the well pump off solar panels is it's got to be a completely sunny day. As a matter of fact, there's little high clouds in the sky right now. You probably can't see them. I'll try to tilt the camera. You might be able to see some of those high clouds. If one of those high clouds ran in front of the sun while I'm on the well, it would drain the batteries really quick because the batteries aren't fully charged yet. I'd have to wait until 4 o'clock to be able to run it off the batteries. And by that time, there's not enough sunlight to recharge the battery. So it's pretty complicated, or I just have to get a ton more solar panels to run the well. But if I got rid of the refrigerator, then I wouldn't have to worry about recharging the batteries. I could drain them down, and the next day they could charge back up. So the refrigerator does take a lot of electricity. Now imagine if I had a freezer. Right now I got 10 solar panels. I would probably need another 10 solar panels, but not just solar panels. I think I got 7 batteries, so I would need another 7 batteries. I'd need another charge controller because I've already maxed out the charge controller. And the charge controller regulates the amount of electricity your solar panels are sending to the batteries. So that way, if your batteries are charged up, it restricts the amount of electricity in there so you don't overcharge the batteries, burn up the batteries. So you got to have the charge regulator. Well, it's maxed out at 40 amps right now, so I'd have to get in a charge regulator. So we're talking another $800 investment plus the freezer cost. So what I suggested in the live feed is can your meat. Now, what the YouTuber said is it might be cheaper to buy your canned meat. However, she did say right now she's having a hard time finding canned meat in the grocery store because they're all dented cans. And you don't want to store dented cans for long term. So what we're talking about is if there's an emergency, a prepping emergency, you want to be able to dip into your storage, your stockpile of food. Well, if it's dented cans, there's no sense of safety having a dented can. Those cans could go bad. Her and I kind of disagree on this point. I think canning food is pretty cheap because I use Tattler lids. Tattler lids are reusable lids. I showed you this, I think, 2 days ago in a video. So there's really no cost involved other than the propane that it takes to can your food. However, she thinks there's some cost involved, which that's fine. Now, the biggest savings for us is we are now butchering our own food. So the chickens we're raising, we're getting that at pretty cheap cost. I mean, it doesn't hardly cost anything to raise, I don't know, what, 25 pounds of meat, of chicken? But I've done the analysis. I don't think it's that expensive to can your own food, and then you can store it. You can store that for nearly indefinitely. Now, the Food and Drug Administration or somebody, one of those agencies, say that you're only supposed to keep canned food for 1 year. And you should follow their instructions, not telling you not to. Look it up, take your own risk. But Carolyn and I are pretty comfortable eating food that's older than that. Now, another question that came up, and this is the one that I haven't talked about a long time, is we are debt-free. We have no bills. We got debt-free years ago, I think around 2014, somewhere around there, maybe 2017, I'm not sure. But I was stuck after my divorce with $50,000 in debt. We got it all paid off and we've not seen debt since. Right now, I'm using my credit card to buy gas, and then I come home and I pay the bill because my ATM card isn't working at the gas pump. So that's the only reason I'm using my credit card, but there's no interest on it because I come home and I pay it as soon as it shows up on my balance sheet on the credit card. So it takes a day or two. So we have no debt. But the question was, I have enough money to pay off my student loan. This is where it got a little confusing. Should I pay off my student loan or my house? She clearly indicated that she didn't have enough money to pay off the house. So I guess what she's saying is she's got enough money to pay off some of the house. Well, here's what I would suggest is pay off your highest interest rate item, whatever that is. Because as soon as you get that paid off, now you don't have that monthly payment. So let's say your payment is $300. And you get it paid off. Now you have an extra $300 to pay off the next item. So let's say she did pay off her student loan. She got it all paid off. Now she has an extra $300. So now she's putting down her regular mortgage payment. Let's say that's $1,000. So you got a $1,000 mortgage payment plus another $300. Well, that $300, you're not getting penalized on interest. That's free. And I know a lot of people don't understand interest, but interest is just a killer to your pocketbook. I'm just going to throw out hypothetical numbers. These don't add up to anything, but let's say you got 10% interest and you buy a $20,000 car. So you're paying payments on that for 5 years and you're paying into the interest on it. Well, now your $20,000 car, that's all it's worth. Blue book value was $20,000 that you bought it for, but you ended up paying $25,000. Well, what sense does that make? You're paying $25,000 for a $20,000 car. So you go sell the car, there's no way you're going to get any type of money back on that. Same thing with a house. If your house doesn't appreciate enough to pay off the interest that you've paid in for the last 30 years, when you sell your house, even though, let's say you bought your house for $100,000 and then you sold it for $200,000, just using this as an example, but you've paid in $200,000. So you paid $100,000 plus the interest, you sell it for $200,000, you're still out $50,000 because of all the interest you lost. Again, all hypothetical numbers, just making it easy for you to understand. But the YouTuber that I like so much had a brilliant idea, because I mentioned this, that you should probably look at building a tiny house. I know a lot of people frown at the idea of building tiny houses, but the thing is a lot of younger people who can't afford houses. I mean, there's economic people now talking about that there are certain states that people cannot buy houses in anymore because companies, banks, are not loaning the money. These houses are just in a bad market. They're way overpriced. They're not worth what they're asking for. Young people have no options. They just can't afford it. So a lot of young people are building tiny houses. And to me, this is the most brilliant idea that Carolyn and I have ever had. Well, for me, I don't know about Carolyn, but for me, it definitely was the most brilliant idea I've ever had. I'm very comfortable in here. There's just nothing wrong with this house. Carolyn sometimes discusses, let's use that word, that she'd like to have more storage. I think she's generally happy, and I'm definitely happy. Now, don't go out and buy a tiny house. That's a terrible idea. Tiny houses can run $90,000 to $100,000, and you're getting a bedroom. That's all you're getting. Well, a little bit bigger than a bedroom. Or a lot of people will go to these Home Depot and get those sheds. I'm not a big fan of it because they're not very well built, but you can pick one of those up for $4,000. You'd have to insulate it, you'd have to put walls on the inside and the ceiling and all that, but you could actually convert that into a house pretty easily. So if you'll check out that super thanks button down there, I'd really appreciate it. So I hope I can inspire you to plan ahead so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.